The galaxy had songs about Princess Yolani of the Illuvian dynasty, but never the flattering kind. Children on distant moons whispered stories that she was cursed. Drifting spaces spread jokes in smoky cantinas, saying if you saw the princess in person, you'd understand why even her own people refused to arrange a royal union. And while most gossip in the galaxy died eventually, this rumor never did, because it was true that Yolani had reached her 3rd century without bonding. True that her empathic aura, once considered a gift among the Illuvians, was somehow distorted, unreadable, unnerving. True that suitors reported feeling cold around her, as if her very presence drained emotion instead of transmitting it. And so the galaxy mocked her, not openly in front of the queen, of course, but behind closed doors, behind raised glass cups at noble gatherings, and in private diplomatic frequencies across star systems. Unlovable, they called her. The princess heard every whisper. Empathy, even broken empathy, picked up more than people realized. In quiet nights beneath the shimmering towers of Elerin Palace, she would sit by a balcony and stare at stars that seemed so close she could sip their light. And she wondered if somewhere in that glittering canvas there existed someone who would see her differently. Her mother, Queen Celira, insisted an alliance marriage must be secured. Without a bond, the throne will not recognize you, she reminded gently, though firm beneath the softness. Your aura frightens our people. You must give them something stronger to believe in. So suitors were summoned, telepaths, nobles, even 2 famed empaths from the distant Miruan system, all left by morning, pale and uncomfortable, as if the princess drained something unnamed from them. Yolani tried to pretend it didn't hate, but every failed attempt tightened the quiet ache inside her ribs, like stardust bruises. It was worse the day the Galactic Court broadcast cruel commentary about her aura reading. Someone made a comedic holo comparing her presence to a dying star. The audience laughed. The clip spread among planets like wildfire. She didn't eat for 3 days. When the council eventually forced an arranged diplomatic meeting with potential allies from the Sol system, primitive humans, barely interstellar, everyone assumed this would be another embarrassment. Even the Queen admitted privately she expected nothing meaningful to come from it. But Sol had recently unlocked faster-than-light travel, and protocol required greeting new civilizations. And besides, humans were still socially primitive, unpredictable, and emotionally messy. Illuvians preferred controlled connections, stable emotional resonance, not the raw chaos humans supposedly embodied. But fate rarely listened to royal plans. On the 72nd day of the Illuvian cycle, a diplomatic shuttle landed on the palace platform. Standing among the delegation was a human translator named Elias Hale, tall, dark-haired, gentle-eyed. He bowed respectfully before the Queen. His voice was quiet, steady, as if careful not to intrude. Illuvians prize emotional etiquette. Most non-empaths felt loud in presence alone. But this human did not. Queen Celira was genuinely surprised. "You are unusually calm for your kind," she said, almost suspicious. Elias smiled slightly. Nervousness rarely helps diplomacy. The court laughed politely, though inwardly amused that a low-ranked human dared speak like an equal. Elias didn't notice, or pretended not to. Yolani stood behind her mother, observing silently. She expected to feel discomfort pouring off him. She expected the subtle flinch everyone made near her. But Elias merely glanced toward her once, bowed politely, without staring too long, without reacting strangely, and continued answering questions about Earth's recent development of Starlane navigation. Hours passed. Negotiation finished. The humans were escorted toward private guest quarters. But Elias lingered just a moment longer, noticing Yolani was still standing near the balcony archway, partially hidden behind shimmering crystal pillars. For a moment they were alone, or as alone as 2 people could be in a palace surrounded by guards pretending not to listen. "You didn't speak," he said softly, not accusing, just curious. Yolani wasn't used to questions that had nothing behind them. No agenda, no fear. It took her a moment to answer. I speak only when required. Do you want to be required? His voice held warm humor, but not mockery. She stiffened defensively. Humans are known for asking too many personal questions. Only when someone looks sad, he replied gently. Sad. No one had ever used that word to describe her. Cold, frightening, strange. Yes, but sad? He turned slightly as the escort called him. Good night, princess. She didn't answer, but something in her chest warmed just a fraction, like a seed of heat placed gently in glacial silence. That night she couldn't sleep. Humans didn't interest her academically. They were barely out of planetary adolescence in galactic terms. But Elias, he was strange. His emotions didn't wash outward like other species. Instead, they felt contained, held politely inside, as if he were guarding them. It intrigued her. She had never met someone whose emotional field felt like a shield rather than an uncontrolled broadcast. The next day, protocols required Yolani to accompany visitors during cultural observation, mostly ceremonial tours. She dreaded these usually, because her presence tended to unsettle diplomats. But Elias walked beside her without visible discomfort. He seemed genuinely fascinated by alluvian gardens, their floating hydrangeas shifting color according to mood. They change depending on who touches them, she explained, uncertain why she bothered saying anything at all. Plants reacting to feelings, Elias whispered in awe, touching a petal that shimmered turquoise. Earth has nothing like this. Yolani almost smiled. Almost. He asked questions, but not intrusive ones. Instead of interrogating her lineage, he pointed at sky bridges and asked how they suspended across gravity wells. Instead of flattering the Queen repeatedly, like every other diplomat, he talked about Earth literature, star navigation theory, and asked Yolani about alluvian music traditions. Finally, at one point, he asked something no one had dared. Does your aura make you uncomfortable? She stopped walking. He immediately stepped back, apologetic. Forgive me. I read a briefing about empathic resonance among alluvians. I didn't realize it might be rude to. It isn't rude, she cut in quietly. Just unusual. He nodded slowly. If you ever want someone who doesn't feel your aura at all, humans are terrible at emotional sensing. We just guess and hope. Yolani stared at him. He held his hands clasped behind his back, posture respectful. And for the first time in centuries, she felt something new. Not fear, not pity, just simple human kindness. That evening a formal reception was held. Nobles filled the hall, wearing shimmering silk layers and glowing jewelry. When Elias entered behind his ambassador, nobles whispered instantly, a primitive species, present in their most sacred halls. It bordered on offensive. Yolani sensed irritation, curiosity, arrogant amusement radiating through the room, until she realized something else. Several nobles were watching her again, measuring how close she stood to the human. Their unspoken disdain prickled across her emotions like static. Suddenly Elias leaned toward her slightly, voice low. Does everyone always stare like this? She exhaled softly. They stare because they fear me. He turned his head slightly. I don't. Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken so plainly. May I confess something? Elias whispered, voice low enough only she could hear. Before coming here, I memorized your name. The human briefing mentioned your situation. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable speaking about things that hurt her. But I don't believe something's wrong with you. Those words, said so quietly, so sincerely, struck her harder than any insult ever had. The next day, the human delegation prepared to return to orbit. But before boarding the shuttle, Elias found Yolani near the same balcony where they had first spoken. I'm returning with the embassy, he said. Earth wants to negotiate cultural trade. Rumor is they'll request a Luvian technology exchange. I don't know the timeline. Could be months. Could be years. Yolani nodded, pretending she wasn't affected. Elias hesitated. Can I ask one last inappropriate human question? She didn't know why she smiled then, but she did. A tiny, barely noticeable smile. You may. Are you actually unapproachable? He asked softly. Or have people just been afraid to approach you? Yolani stared at him, feeling her voice suddenly trapped somewhere behind her ribs. I don't understand humans, she whispered. He gently touched a carved pillar, not her, but close enough she felt his warmth. Maybe someday, he said simply, you'll want to. He boarded the shuttle, and that should have been the end of it. A strange memory, a faint echo. Yet Yolani thought about him for weeks. She tried to bury it under royal duties. She attended negotiations, listened to council matters, visited healers who promised to fix her aura. But every night she found herself staring at distant stars again, wondering if one of them sheltered human thinking about her too. When the next Sol diplomatic vessel requested permission to land, Yolani secretly hoped Elias would be among them. But he wasn't. The delegation leader explained he had been assigned as cultural liaison on Earth, preparing programs for future exchange. Months passed. Loneliness always felt heavy on her shoulders, but after Elias, it felt heavier somehow, like the absence of something she had never known she wanted. Then one cycle evening, as Yolani walked through the quiet palace corridor, she saw a young aide rushing toward her. A message for your highness, the aide said, out of breath, from the Sol liaison office. Yolani tried to hide her sudden rush of emotion. She dismissed the aide and opened the message alone. A recorded human voice spoke through the shimmering crystal pad. Hello, Princess Yolani. Elias Hale speaking from Earth. I've begun researching emotional psych fields. Human understanding is limited, but I'm trying anyway. Also, I read an old Terran poem and thought of you. It says the loneliest star shines brightest because darkness fears its light. Humans say poetry is a language of unspoken truths. I don't know if your people think that way, but somehow I hoped you might like it. The recording ended. Her chest ached, in the gentlest, most unfamiliar way. She didn't know whether to smile or weep. Weeks later, he sent another message, describing Earth's sunsets when that carried traces of ocean salt, small cities illuminated by neon at night, laughter from crowded markets, humanity's chaotic yet earnest hearts. He sent images of sky drawn in orange fire, and a picture of himself on a balcony near coastal cliffs. Hours passed before she found courage to respond. Her voice trembled slightly. Elias, your planet is beautiful. When months passed again, his messages returned with more warmth, more stories. She found herself waiting for them. She replayed his voice sometimes late at night when palace corridors felt too wide, and her aura felt like a cage instead of a gift. She wrote him back carefully, sometimes awkwardly, but honestly. They never spoke of feelings. Not yet. They just shared pieces of themselves. Human curiosity and Illuvian silence blending in unexpected harmony. But the galaxy isn't kind to quiet, blossoming things. Political rumors spread that Princess Yolani was communicating personally with a primitive alien. Nobles mocked her even harder. Some feared humans would become a diplomatic stain if associated too closely with the royal family. They whispered that she was desperate for affection, willing to settle for a lesser species. Her mother confronted her gently. Yolani, you cannot risk your future for unrealistic attachment. Yolani swallowed the hurt. I'm not attached. But the queen saw through her. Even if you were, humans cannot empathically bond. It is biologically impossible. Yolani said nothing. She didn't believe it anymore. Eventually, disaster came, not from gossip, but from war. A nomadic battle hive known as a Kareen swept through nearby systems, devouring colonies and disabling trade lanes. They were merciless, consuming populations, leaving planets hollow. The Illuvian fleet was legendary among peaceful civilizations, but outdated in true combat. Panic reached palace chambers faster than military intelligence could respond. Council agreed an Allied defense pact must be activated immediately. Ambassadors were sent to secure emergency assistance. Every star nation responded with caution, except one. Earth volunteered instantly. When Elias came with a human fleet to assist, Yolani understood something had changed. Humans had grown. Their technology wasn't merely adequate. It was surprisingly strategic, adaptive, reflecting desperate creativity born from centuries of human conflict. And Elias wasn't just a translator anymore. He was strategic liaison, wearing dark navy uniform fitted with symbols she didn't recognize. He greeted her with a bow deeper than before, yet his eyes held a warmth that nearly undid her composure. You asked if humans could empathically bond, he said quietly in a private corner of the war chamber. We can't. Not biologically, but emotionally. He allowed a tiny smile. We never needed biology to bond. For the first time in centuries, she laughed through tears she didn't expect. War forced decisions quickly. The Illuvian fleet crumbled under initial hive assault. Elias offered a tactical plan. It required pairing human ships with Illuvian shield craft in risky maneuvers that terrified both militaries. Queen Celira hesitated. Working that closely with emotional unpredictables seemed reckless. But Yolani stepped forward. Mother, trust him. Those words shocked the entire war council. Yolani rarely demanded anything. The queen studied her daughter, then slowly nodded. The combined fleets launched. Battles raged near the crimson rings of the Arkan Belt. Human fighters maneuvered unpredictably, forcing hive ships into shield traps created by Illuvian gravitational barriers. The strategy worked, until a catastrophic strike hit the Illuvian flagship. Communication collapsed. Ships scattered. And suddenly, Yolani found herself trapped aboard a damaged cruiser drifting toward hostile hive territory. Illuvian defense screamed retreat. The captain insisted escape pods were too risky. But Yolani, instead of panicking, sent a single-coded distress message, not to the Illuvian fleet, but directly to Elias's personal frequency. His voice answered almost immediately, raw fear breaking through transmitted static. Yolani, hold on. I'm coming. Minutes passed like long hours. When Elias's ship forced emergency docking onto Yolani's crumbling cruiser, atmosphere alarms blared. He sprinted through fire smoke corridors, found her trapped behind collapsing panels. She stared as he fought through flames to reach her, this fragile human risking everything for her. When the hull shook violently, he shielded her as debris crashed. She felt warmth from his arms, steady heartbeat close to hers. Shock rippled through her aura, raw, overwhelming emotion, entirely his, flooding into her sensitivity. But instead of draining him, something reversed. His presence didn't recoil, it poured warmth into her. Her aura, for the first time in her existence, synchronized. They escaped seconds before destruction, launching from the doomed cruiser into the docking corridor of his human ship. Emergency blast doors sealed behind them just as explosions consumed everything. He checked her for injuries. She whispered shakily, "You came." "Of course I came." His voice broke into relief. "I would cross a galaxy for you." Something ancient inside her heart finally shattered open, not painfully, but like sunrise breaking across darkness. Human fleets, reinforced by desperate Allied support, finally cornered the hive horde. The battle ended days later, leaving wreckage drifting across starfields. When victory was declared, Yolani stood beside Elias on the observation deck of his flagship, watching dying embers of war fade into cosmic void. Silence stretched between them, filled with things neither had dared say. Finally Elias spoke softly. I don't care what your people believe about you. I don't care if your aura feels strange. I care about you. Yelani's voice trembled. Elias, the galaxy mocked me for centuries. You don't understand what I am. He stepped closer, voice steady. Then let me understand. Let me stay, learn you, love you if you'll let me. The word love hung suspended. Yelani stared at him, terrified and hopeful. Humans live such brief lives. You'll fade before I even reach my mid-cycle. Elias smiled gently. Then let me spend every moment of my small life showing you what your long life deserves. Tears streamed silently down her face. She touched his cheek, the first voluntary intimate touch she had initiated in 3 centuries. Her aura awakened like luminous fire, no longer distorted, but glowing with resonance formed from choice rather than obligation. Across the galaxy, rumors spread again. But this time, whispers changed. Not unlovable, but something new, unfamiliar. A human had given his heart to a princess feared by stars themselves. And the princess, once cursed by gossip and shadow, had finally found someone who didn't fear her soul. Not because fate demanded, not because alliance required, but because love, unpredictable and impossible, found a way across galaxies, across species, across everything she had been told she couldn't be. Somewhere in the quiet after war, standing beneath starlit balcony light, Yelani whispered the only truth she ever needed. I don't understand humans, she said softly. Elias took her hand. You don't have to, he murmured gently. Just let yourself be understood by one. She leaned into him, heart trembling with new warmth, and for the first time in her existence she believed she was not a curse, not broken, not feared, not unlovable. Just loved, completely, and forever, in whatever time humans could give.